Hello, 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 everybody. It's Susie McMahon. I feel like long time no see and talk. It is August 9th, and here we are for my virtual book club with our featured author, William Walsh, or as he's nicknamed himself, Bill. Is it okay if we call you Mr. Walsh? Bill, can we call you that?
Bill's fine. I mean, yeah.
Fantastic. And then, of course, you guys all know our counterpart, Melissa St. Clair, is here to help me co host. I'm just going to give everybody a few moments to realize that it is 7 o'clock on the East Coast. It's over here in Seattle. And I'm sorry if my room's a little dark, but it's the best I can do at the moment on the fly. But we wanted to welcome everyone that's joining us. Please let me know where you're watching from in the comments so that our featured author knows who's here with us. The numbers are ticking up, and I'm going to start by just reading William Walsh's bio. Is that okay, guys? Hey, we've got somebody from Istanbul, Turkey, and somebody from Grand Junction, Colorado so far. That's a pretty big range of location.
I think Istanbul wins, don't they?
I think so. Vivian from one of my travel counterparts. Houston, Texas is here too. So we'll see who else joins us. But here comes William's bio. William Walsh is an author of 7 other books. Of course, we featured, you guys, Lakewood in our club this month or last month into the month. 7 other books, including the award-winning collection of poems called Fly Fishing in Times Square, widely published in some of the finest journals, including 5 Points, the Georgia Review, the Kenyon Review, and Literary Matters. He is also known for his literary interviews, which have included, I can't pronounce, can you tell me?
Milosh?
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Joseph Brodsky.
Brodsky, yes.
Brodsky, thank you. A.R. Ammons, Richard Blanco, Evan Boland, Pat Conroy, Harry Cruz, James Dickey, Rita Dove, Mary Hood, Ursula Le Guin, Andrew Lytle, and Lee Smith. Born in Jamestown, New York, and raised in Lakewood until moving south in 1974, his historical family has resided in I can't say Chautauqua either. How do you say it properly? Chautauqua County since pre-Revolutionary War. Wow. A graduate of Georgia State University and Vermont College, he resides in Hotlanta with his family. He is the director of undergraduate and graduate creative writing programs at Reinhardt University in Waleska, where he teaches literature and creative writing. He is the editor of the James Dickey Review. When not writing, he spends time with his family, enjoys competitive tennis and golf, as well playing chess internationally. Wow, what a fun bio. Very challenging for me to read. Welcome.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure.
And it's my understanding that you just got home from a lot of days of travel. Is that right?
Yeah, I was up in New York for 14 days. I did, I think, 12 author events in bookstores and libraries and so forth. It was wonderful. I enjoyed it, but it was exhausting, and I had not expected that. It takes a lot of energy to do that. I did enjoy. I did not go to any chain restaurants. I ate at all mom and pops, and that was wonderful. The food was great, huge helpings, and so I gained about 10 or 12 pounds in 14 days. So my new kick right now is my diet, hence my pomegranate juice. But it was a lot of fun. And you mentioned Chautauqua County and the Revolutionary War. I've been researching one of my ancestors, and it was my great grandfather, Thomas Card. That would be on my mom's side of the family. And I found his farm when I was up there this time in a little town called Clymer, New York. And so that was really, it was very settling in a way where I sort of said, realized, okay, this is partly where I'm from, this 140-acre farm. I spoke to the man who owns it, an Amish gentleman named Lester, really nice guy. And we talked for 10 or 15 minutes. And so that was really nice, because he was born in 1800. I'm sorry, 1810, and lived in 1900. So, just after the Revolutionary War, by about 40 or 50 years, give or take, that was his life all the way up to 1900. So
Wow.
it goes all the way back prior to that. So
That's
Wow.
fantastic. Well, welcome to my virtual book club. I'm going to turn this over to Melissa to ask you our first question that was submitted by book members. But I do want to let you know that Sean has joined us from Dallas. Estelle has joined us from Beaufort. And then I think I know who's saying they're from Columbia, Missouri. That's Pamela. So Melissa, I'm going to let you ask Mr. Walsh our first question of the night. Go for it.
Awesome. Well, it's so great to have you here, Bill. First question, did you always know from the start Kimberly would leave a poem?
Oh, I just got chills because no, I did not. The interesting thing about this novel is it took 39 years for me to write it. I started it when I was about 18 years old. And, I left when I was 12, give or take. And then I lived in 8 or 9 states. And I think I lived in 11 houses in the next 8 years. And so when I graduated, or when I was in college, I had this idea of going back to my hometown, which is what Robert does. In that sense, his sensibilities are mine. And I knew that his sister would be dead when the book starts, but I didn't know she would write these poems. And in fact, what I realized after I had the galleys and I was reading the galleys and making small changes, when I got to the poems, I just stopped and paused and realized it's really the only time we ever get to hear Kimberly's voice, and we get to see who she is. But what you're really seeing is who Robert was as a boy, but from her perspective. And he, as a young man who's 18, 19 years old, sees himself again from his sister's point of view. And I didn't even realize that until I was in the galley phase, what I had done. But those poems took years to write, actually. So I'd written them and I was revising over and over, and I never got them to the level I wanted, which was they needed to be in the voice of a little girl. And I finally did. I felt at one point I got to that point, and I was happy with them. But they took years. I'll bet those poems took 10 years to write, to get them to where I wanted. I mean, I wrote other things in between that, of course, and I came back to it a year or two later and rewrote them. But the way they are now, it took quite a while.
That's incredible. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. And a question that came across live, which I know the answer to, but if you could address, is this book, part of it, autobiographical?
No. Well, I'll say this. There's one scene, and I may have mentioned this, I think, at the Conroy Center. There is one scene in the book that is autobiographical, and I'm not going to tell anyone which one it is. They have to figure it out. But the book, it's fiction. But it takes place in a real town. Lakewood is real. Originally, I tried disguising everything. I changed the name of the town. It was originally Baker, New York. I changed everybody's names. I changed everything. I didn't want anyone to know I was writing about Lakewood. And that was okay, fine. A lot of people have done that. But during the pandemic, I just had this epiphany. Why not just write about your hometown? And other people have done it. Edgar Lee Masters did it in the Spoon River Anthology with his poetry. Sherwood Anderson did it with Winesburg, Ohio, which, those are two of my favorite books. The moment I realized I needed to write it as Lakewood, the real town, everything changed. Everything opened up. I just had this freedom to write about everybody and anything I wanted to write about. And so it's completely fictional, but the town as it was in 1973, as I saw it, as I walked the streets, as I bicycled it as a kid, as I played baseball a block away, everything about the town is autobiographical, but the entire story is fictional. So in that sense, I guess it's a duality. So I put a fictional story in an autobiographical town. There you go.
That's a good combination. It's easy for you to recognize the things that you want to write about. It helps you with your description, I'm sure, when you've been there and it's not just totally created fictionally. A follow-up question.
I'll tell you real quick. So there are some people in the novel who are real people.
Okay.
For instance, the pharmacist, Tony Barone. 3 days after I finished the book, I was going to call him or email him, but he died. And so he never knew that he was in the book. But I got permission from his wife to use his name, his likeness. There are some other people in the book who are real. My mom's in the book, but no one's going to know that. My mom figured out, she goes, oh, well, that's me and your dad. But my grandfather's in there, but it's not like there's an arrow saying, hey, everybody, this is Bill's mom and dad. But I put friends and I put relatives and people that were very influential and important to me. I put them in little cameo scenes, and I could take the cameo scenes out and it wouldn't hurt the novel, but I put them in there as an homage. And so, but I had to get permission from people to use their likeness. And I did that in a few places. So that it even becomes more autobiographical, because I did go into the drugstore when I was about 10 or 11 or 12 years old. And I did buy baseball cards, and Mr. Barone rang me up at the cash register. So, I mean, that's not the scene I was talking about earlier, but so there is that huge autobiographical nature to the actual town. So
that's fantastic. A follow-up question I have for you about that is, because you just did your tour, you were in the area of where the book is written, is my understanding. How is your book being received in those smaller towns? And tell me about the events and the fact you didn't eat at any chain restaurants, which kudos to you, all mom and pops. Tell me more about and how your book is being embraced in the actual town.
Well, that was something I was a little scared about. I thought, well, everyone, because sometimes it happens. You write a book about a town and people see themselves. For instance, in Spoon River Anthology by Edgar Lee Masters, he angered everybody. I mean, everyone was very upset that he wrote these poems about people in town. Now, they were dead, but everybody knew who they were. So when I wrote the book, I was a tad bit timid, thinking, well, people are going to be angry, but I don't show anybody in an ill light, mainly because everybody in the novel, for the most part, is fictional. The major characters are all fictional characters, so none of them are real people who could come back and say, oh, you portrayed me poorly, or I don't like what you had me say. None of the main characters are real. So I didn't have to worry about that, but I was at first a little worried. But the reception was fine. I had nice book signings, sold a bunch of books. People asked me a lot of questions. The curiosity is what I did to recreate Lakewood. I mean, I grew up there, and so I knew where things were that are no longer there. And so I did all this research to make sure, every fire hydrant was exactly where it was in 1973, and all these little nuances. The only thing I did was this: the house that Robert lives in is not actually in Lakewood. It's in another town. I simply moved it from that town and I put it on the corner of Chautauqua Avenue and Terrace. And then the house that's really there now, which just sold for $1.2 million, I moved it over to the left. So in the novel, Robert's house is on the corner. The house that's really there is over just a little bit. Other than that, everything in the town is absolutely 100% accurate. I went back many times. I did my research. I have 100 books in the other room, all on Lakewood and Chautauqua County and Jamestown. They are all my research books. And for years I was reading them, and then I put things in, I would take things out. So everyone really liked the idea that I portrayed the town accurately. And so the reception's been great. I did a lot of libraries, some bookstores. One of the nicest places I did an event, and I did it with the poet Stephen Corey, who's from Athens, and Stephen used to be the editor of the Georgia Review.
I recognize that name.
Yeah, and we had a great time. We did a few events together. We did one night at the Fenton History Museum, and this is this old, beautiful house, and it was just wonderful. So I took a tour of the house, and so the reception was great. Some of my relatives came out and came to some of the readings, and I signed a lot of books, and everyone was. Nobody complained. Let's say that. So
that's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that with us. And I know Melissa has another question for you. And after that, we'll have you read some excerpts from your book, in case someone that's watching has not actually read the book yet, to entice them a bit. But Melissa, what do you have extra? What next question do you have?
So it was really more of maybe an aha moment for me. Perhaps realizing that Annie, who we think is a victim, could have really been living out her love for Stephen in the same house. I don't know.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I've discussed this. So what has happened is here's the house, and Robert lived there, and he comes back, and of course he's house sitting his childhood home, this beautiful 16-room Victorian house. And of course, it's where his sister died. Well, when he comes back, he meets Annie, and Annie's boyfriend was Stephen, and Stephen drowns in at Kinzu Dam. So Robert becomes the surrogate, and he is the same age Stephen was when Stephen died. So it brings up the question, is Annie in love with Robert, or is she in love with what she used to have with Stephen, and Robert has just simply taken Stephen's place? Now, that's not a healthy situation. And Annie's broken, as wonderful, as beautiful as she is, as smart as she is, and her education and his wonderful disposition, she's broken. She's not been able to love anybody since the death of Stephen. She's gone out on dates, but she's never been able to give herself to anybody else. And she only does that after Robert is beaten, and she realizes the possibility of his mortality, which she's already experienced once. So now I'll tell you a secret. I'm already writing the sequel, and I'd written it several years ago, and I'm going back and I'm rewriting it, and I forgot about something, and I had this aha moment, like, oh, how could you have forgotten that? So what you find out later is that the reason Stephen drowns is he jumps in to save Annie. You don't know this in the first book, because Annie can't swim, and he dies trying to save her. Mike ends up saving Annie, and then goes to save Stephen, and doesn't. And of course, Mike is underwater well too long, and he gets saved by the man down the street, one of the Iroquois Indian, I think, I forget his name. But so you learn this in the second book, that there has to be some guilt with Annie, that the fact that her boyfriend, fiance, died trying to save her, and so there's even guilt there. So now, one of the more interesting things, and I have an interview that should be out in December in the Flannery O'Connor Review, where I was interviewed, and we discussed the idea of Karen. And Karen's 16 years old. Robert's 18 and 19, so they're only a couple of years apart. but Annie's 26. So there's a good 6 years apart from Robert and Annie, not necessarily the healthiest situation for her. So she really maybe falls in love with what used to be. So there's a 10-year gap between Annie and Karen. And of course, Robert and Karen get caught in bed by Annie, which ruins the relationship. But Karen has one role in the entire book, and her job, as many characters are in fiction, her main job is to disrupt Robert's happiness. Now, she doesn't know this. Robert doesn't know this. If you look at Flannery O'Connor's Wise Blood, and you have the character Sabbath Lily, she's trying to seduce Hazel Motes, and Motes is just sort of he's got a goal, and that's to start his own church, the Church of Christ without Christ. Well, he is very myopic, and her role, Sabbath Lily's role, is one thing only, and that is to disrupt his happiness, and his happiness is forming this church. So you have characters all throughout literature and movies who that's their goal. Of course, none of the characters know this. So that's Karen's goal in the entire book, is to disrupt Robert's happiness. Well, he would have been very happy with Annie, and that was what he was moving towards. And so she satisfies that goal. Of course, it breaks everything up, and he goes to Paris, and that's where the next book starts. But you learn later on in that novel that Stephen died trying to save Annie, who couldn't swim. And then, but
tragic,
but drama's the name of the game. And that's what,
true.
Propels. I always say, you put a character in a situation, and based on their character flaws, you give them a dilemma. What are they going to do? They've got to grab the bull by the horn, and neither horn is good, but they have to choose. And so that's kind of what happens. So
wow, that's awesome.
Wow, I love the backstory. Thank you.
I know backstory and forward stories is great. So we've had a few other questions come in, and I promise I'll try to squeeze those in after you read to us a little bit about some excerpts that you might have chosen for us. Bill, we'd love to hear from you. It's always it's such a treat for readers to hear an author read their own work. It's something special, and not all y'all will do it. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to read from, this is Thursday, July 19th. And I read this on July 19th this year at one of my readings, which was really fun. And this is where Karen comes by to begin the seduction of Robert, or vice versa. She's just a young 16-year-old girl who wants to explore the world. And she doesn't know what that entails yet, but she's got an idea, and she wants to, hook up with Robert at some point. So she's sort of navigating those waters. Very treacherous, of course, as we all know. So I'll read this. Thursday, July 19th. Karen came by this evening while I was mowing the lawn. She rode her bicycle to the house. She didn't say much, just giggled a lot sitting on the porch. Strange days indeed. She's pretty, though. I don't have a light on my bike, and if Buck Klein catches me again, he'll give me a ticket. Who's that? I asked. Officer Klein. He's the deputy around here. He's a nice guy, but he'll write you up if he's warned you before. He stopped me last week for no light. I'll drive you home. I'll put your bike in the back of the truck. We don't have to go home immediately. We can drive around or get ice cream or do something. Let's go to the Hotel Lenhart and sit on the porch and watch the boats come in. Yuck, that's where my parents always go. How about Mayville? There's a bar in the Hotel St. Elmo. I did not want to go to a bar and get a drink, not after 8 beers last night. We drove over to the Tasty Freeze on Foote Avenue, got our ice cream, then went to Allen Park and sat at a picnic table. I want some action, she said. Let's go to Mayville. So then it starts the next day, Friday, July 20th. He picks back up. Nothing happened last night with Karen. I wanted to sit on the porch at the Hotel Lenhart and have ice cream, but she had wilder ideas. Allen Park and ice cream cones just wasn't enough excitement for her. She convinced me that the Hotel St. Elmo in Mayville was the happening place. I had only one beer. She had 3 drinks, a Cosmopolitan, a glass of red wine, and a 16-ounce Schlitz. It was a slow night. There were only 3 other people in the bar, and the bartender didn't ask Karen for her ID. While driving around the lake, she said, "Let's go to Midway. I got to pee." So I drove to Midway Amusement Park. Mostly we played skee ball, but then she wanted to ride the Twirl-A-Whirl. We did. And about 2 minutes after, she said, "I don't feel good." And about 30 seconds later, Karen threw up in the bushes. She barfed 2 more times before I had her in the truck. We drove around with the windows down, but she did not barf anymore. "Can I go back to your house and clean up before I go home?" She was cleaning up, and I was sitting outside the bathroom talking to her when she turned and threw up in the toilet. She cleaned up again, and I took her home. I hope that was enough excitement for her, because it was for me. Mowing the yard, Tasty Freeze, Allen Park, St. Elmo Hotel, Midway Park, driving around a drunk girl. By the time I took her home, she was no longer sick. She might have still been drunk, but Roy can't be angry with me. I offered her a quiet evening, but she chose the Twirl-A-Whirl. So now one of the things, thank you. So one of the things that happens is, you're 16 years old and you're this character is starting to explore the world. And it can just be socially, it could be sexually, it could be, doing whatever things she wants to do. But she has her eye on Robert because their ages are close. But she doesn't know you don't mix types of alcohol. She has a Cosmopolitan, a glass of red wine, and a beer. Well, even if she didn't get on the Twirl-A-Whirl, she's not going to be feeling good. So you don't mix your alcohols, but she doesn't know that. And then she certainly doesn't know not to get on the Twirl-A-Whirl. And so she's going to get sick.
But all of us that do know started cringing as soon as the descriptions go. No,
just about everybody has
well.
Everyone's just about made that mistake. So.
Exactly. And that was such a full itinerary, right? I mean, at least 5 stops or something. So they were on a roll.
Now, here's the thing. Every one of those places is real. I lived my house was across the street from Allen Park. Midway is where we always went as kids. And the Tasty Freeze was down the road about maybe a half a mile. About a year and a half ago, they tore it down. So that's very sad. But the Tasty Freeze used to be there. So.
The Tasty Freeze. Well, can I ask you a few more questions that have come in live? I would love
Absolutely.
to. It's okay with
I have plenty of time.
All righty. One of the questions that Shoshana posted was, does Annie feel guilty because of Mike's brain damage since she was under the water too long?
Not necessarily in Lakewood, but she does in the next book. It comes back up. Her guilt, I think, if anything, comes from the way she treats Mike in the first book. She's very protective of Mike. She includes him in everything. She could easily have left and gone off like Mike's girlfriend did. Mike's girlfriend went to New York City, met somebody else, got married, and had 2 kids. Annie didn't. Annie stayed. And Annie has been in the town the whole time. And although it's not stated, it can be assumed that the way she treats Mike now, she has been treating him for the last number of years. They go camping together, with Robert. Mike comes along, Annie comes along. They get in the convertible, they drive around the lake, Mike comes along. So Mike has this disability because of that, but Annie has him in her life. And so if there's guilt, she masking it's the wrong word. She incorporates it into her life to include him as a way of maybe dealing with that, knowing that she's alive because he chose to save her and not Stephen.
Right.
And that comes up in the next book to some, and it'll be a big argument between Robert and Annie. So
I bet.
yeah.
I have one more question, and then I'm going to turn it over to Melissa. I want you, because I heard you tell the story, and I want you to share with everybody. Tell us, there's something in common with your illustrator and then another gentleman's paperback books. Is this is this
Yeah.
illustrator the same as that has done all the illustrations for the Pat Conroy paperback novels that are out right now? Yeah.
Yeah, it's Wendell Minor, and he's one of the nicest men you'll ever meet, and just one of the most wonderful artists. I mean, his work is beautiful. So back when Pat they had a 70th birthday party, and so I went to the big gathering in Beaufort, and then one of the nights went to the birthday party, met a lot of people, and then 3 or 4 months later, I guess it was, or 5 months, Pat died. And Jonathan Howe emailed me a number of months later and said, "Hey, that story you told me about Pat, you and your mom, would you like to write that up for a book we're doing?" And that book turned out to be Scribes,
Right.
Pat Conroy's book of Scribes. And a lot of famous people are in it, like Barbara Streisand, Janice Ian, Terry Kay, all sorts of wonderful people. And then there's me, right? Like I'm at the very bottom of the list, but they liked the story and they included it. Well, among the people in it was Wendell Minor. And I'd read everyone's story and I liked Wendell's a lot. And so one of my books was coming out and I thought, I would love to have Wendell illustrate fly fishing in Times Square. So I got in touch with him. He read the story, or read the poems, wrote me back and said, "Yeah, I'd love to do it." So he illustrated fly fishing in Times Square. He illustrated another novel I have that will be coming out, if not next year, the following year, called The Pig Rider. But before that came out, I went back to work on Lakewood, got that finished, and Touch Point was the first publishing house I sent it to. And within 2 weeks, they said they'd like to publish it. And I said, okay, but I want Wendell Minor to do the cover. And so Wendell read the story, and he called me up and said, "I like this a lot. I'd like to do the cover." So I sent him a picture of the real house, and the railing is the only thing he used of the real house. And he has the typewriter which would have been Robert's point of view, sitting out on the porch, typing, looking over the rail to the lake. And the lake's about 20 miles long. And that railing is the railing of the porch. And I thought, oh, I want a picture of the house. And but then he sent me this, and I went, oh, this is exactly what it should be. It should be Robert's perspective, looking over the porch to the lake. And so he has this just innate sense of what a cover needs to be. And I don't think I want anyone else doing any of my covers ever other than Wendell. I mean, he's so good. And he's not at all pretentious, because he says to me, well, what do you think the cover should be? Or do you like the one I've done? Or what would you like it to be? And I always just say, you're the artist, and I'm going to give you full control of that, because I don't think I could ask or tell him what to do any better than what he already does. I mean, he's just one of the finest illustrators. I tell people he's the Norman Rockwell of our generations. So, I mean, he's just, wonderful. His books are beautiful. He's, just a fantastic illustrator. So that's how that came about. And so he has the next book, which will be The Pig Rider. And then any other novels that I finish up here, I want him to illustrate them. So
that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us, Bill.
Yeah.
Melissa, let's do one more question, and then we have some closeout comments. The time is flying by. I might have one more if we can squeeze it in, but go for it, Melissa.
I know. Oh my goodness. So the car. Can you talk about the car a little bit? Your dream car, just a car.
Oh, you're talking about the 1961 Corvette?
Yes.
So I have a poem in fly fishing in Times Square called The Boy Who Loved Corvettes. And so I can remember the day I was 5 years old and I was about a block away from my house. And it's like 6:30. And it was just a nice, cool, evening. And I heard this rumble and growling sound coming down the street from Halleck Street. And it turned left onto 3rd Avenue. And I was standing there and I watched this red Corvette go by and it has white coves. And I just said, I'm going to have one of those cars someday. It was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. So I asked somebody down the road, some boy who was a teenager, about 16 or 17, who liked to work on souped up cars. I walked down and he and his dad were in the driveway working on one of their, souped up cars. And I said, what was that car that went down the road about 10 minutes ago that was red and had white on the doors? And they said, oh, well, that was so-and-so's car. It's a 61 red Corvette with white coves. And that is how that car got in the book. That's from my childhood. And so, I said, well, let's have a car. That's Stephen's car. And then, of course, Robert does the unthinkable and wrecks it with Caroline, who will return in book 2. But after the car gets fixed and Robert has to pay all the money, he takes it out again. He takes it over this time to Annie's and he wants to take her for a ride. And what happens is she gets angry and says, that's Stephen's car, put it back. And so, he's young, he's trying to be a good guy, make the right decisions, but he keeps shooting himself in the foot.
Like a lot of us do, right?
Yeah, who has not done that? Yeah,
exactly. Well, the question. No, thank you, Melissa, for that. The question I had, just we talked about it a little bit before we started, is we have a really pretty large audience live right now, and I think the combination of club is we have some new poets, some new writers, and some people that might be in transition and creativity in their own life and trying to figure out, do I actually want to become a writer? What piece of advice do you have for any of us in that category?
I have a whole lecture I do, my 12 rules for becoming a successful writer. But there's a couple that are just, you have to write every day. I say, write 1 page a day. If you will write 1 page today, tomorrow morning, get back up, edit that page, and then write 1 more page. That's all you got to do. In 1 year, you'll have your novel written. But you have to do it every day. You have to put some lumber up every day and build that house. And that's the key. And I tell my undergraduate students and my graduate, we have a wonderful MFA program at Reinhardt. It's a low residency program. And you work one-on-one with an award-winning writer. And they guide you and they act as your editor, just the way editors did years ago with Hemingway and Faulkner and Thomas Wolfe and Dorothy Parker. They worked one-on-one. Thomas Wolfe would send Maxwell Perkins 1,500 pages. A manuscript this big, and he would cut 400 pages from it and just edit the daylights out of it. We do that with our students, and they learn very quickly what's working, what's not working, but then how to fix it, how to make the changes, and how to think differently about your plots. What's in it, what is a better inciting incident. All these things. So I would tell you, write every day, but get with someone who is an editor or an author or a professor, and pick their brain like we're doing right here. There's so many things you can learn just by listening to somebody about writing. And I still do it. I go to lectures. I go meet different people, hear people talk, because I don't know it all. There's no way. I'm learning every day, which is one of the reasons I love teaching my students, because when I'm teaching them, there are things I learn or things that, kind of dawn on you. We go, oh yeah, I didn't realize that. And so you're always learning some technique or some way of making your writing better. And having a community of friends who are writers who are very supportive. That's the key. Some people say, well, I don't know what my family's going to think. I'm like, don't worry about it. Do what you have to do. If you want to be a writer, write every day and tell them, look, if you didn't want me writing about you, you should have treated me better, but change people's names. But that's the key. Write every day, or try to write 1 page a day. Find that time when it's best for you. For me, I like writing in the morning. By 5:30 or 6 o'clock, I'm sitting down writing. I give my writing the best of my early mind in the morning. Some people like to write late at night, and that's okay. Whatever works for you, sit down and do it, but make it a priority. It's not the only priority in your life, but you should be able to take some part of your day and say, okay, I'm going to sit down for a half an hour or an hour and write 1 page. Then tomorrow, come back and read it and edit it, and use that editing process as the jumping off point to write your next page. What you'll find is you'll end up writing one day 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 pages. 1 page isn't going to satisfy you. And all of a sudden you start getting disciplined, and you get in this mode where, okay, I have to turn the TV off. I can't watch football all day on a Sunday, which I would do, or a Saturday, college football. You have to discipline yourself. That's the key. If you're going to be a writer, you have to have that kind of discipline. It's like building a house. You have to put lumber up every day or it doesn't get built. And that's how I know somebody's serious. When somebody writes every day, or if you can write 5 out of 7 days, during the week, then you're serious about it. And you're going to accomplish your goal. And the other thing I tell people is there's no conspiracy against talent. I have a list of about 30 books, some of the finest books, best-selling books that nobody wanted to publish. Just nobody wanted to publish. I mean, nobody wanted to publish Harry Potter, and the publisher that published it didn't publish fiction like, Harry Potter, but they took a chance because the man took the book home and his daughter started reading it and couldn't put it down.
Right.
And so there's a lot of books that nobody wanted to publish, but sooner or later they will get published if they're good. And every writer has written a lot of bad books that will never get published, things that are apprentice work. But if your work is good, if you're talented, it'll get published. There's no conspiracy that says, hey, we're not going to publish you.
Right.
They want to publish good material. So, but you have to keep at it, every day, at least 5 out of 7 days a week. And you start living with your characters. I mean, I go down the road having conversations with Robert and Annie, and people must think I'm nuts. I'm talking to, back and forth to the characters. What would Robert say to Annie in this situation? Or what would she say to him in this situation if he had done something? And I work these things out, the dialogue in the car, by myself, not with people in the car because they don't want to hear it. But I work these things out, and then I come home, and the next day I'll sit down and I'll write that dialogue scene. But you start living with it, and you have to want it. You have to want to do it, and you have to want to see your story come to life. And and it takes discipline. That's the key. That really is the key, is the discipline. So
well, thank you so much for that, you guys. That's an added tip from our professor friend.
yeah.
But I just wanted to let Melissa do some closing remark, and then Bill, I just want to thank you for jumping in and being a featured author in my virtual book club, which started back in 2020. And we just keep featuring authors and meeting you live and making new friends. And it's been an enjoyable ride for me, and I hope everyone else in the book club as well. So thank you, Bill. Melissa, I'll let you do some closing remarks, and then Bill can go rest after all your travels, and Melissa and I will do some book club business. So thank you again.
Yes, this was so wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And be sure to come back into the group and check out all the comments. They've been very kind, of course. And just best wishes with your future writing.
Well, thank you. And, anytime you need me back, just let me know. I mean, I love this. This was fun. Again, I tell you, I love your format. And I'd love to come back.
We'd love to have you back. All right,
So
Bill. I'll remove you from the stage, but I won't do it abruptly. I just want to thank you again for your time.
thank you very much, and I enjoyed it, and I hope everyone keeps writing and does good work, as they say.
Thank
All right,
you.
y'all. All right,
Rest
bye-bye.
well. Thanks for your time.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay. So what a fun night that was. Again, Melissa, I just love our virtual book club meetings. What do you think about our conversation tonight?
Oh my goodness, he is so great. And I just love hearing the authors talk about, well, the backstory and how they weave the story, the fact, the fiction. And it's just, that's even just more intriguing sometimes than, the book, that just reading that, just to know all of those things behind the scenes. So, yeah.
And just having a light bulb moment when you hear different things and go, I remember that. And it's really neat. And then, of course, hearing the authors read their own work is turned into one of my most favorite things. I just wanted to share with everybody the reason I didn't have him recommend us to another author is we're kind of backlogged, and you're going to start having 2 books a month, 2 authors a month for like September, October, November, potentially, so that we can make sure to feature everyone that is kind of on the docket, as they say. And speaking of that, the next book we have is Where I Can't Follow by Ashley Blooms. If you recall, Jonathan Haupt recommended Ashley, and our introduction to her was via video. So I will try to find that video and place it in the page. But this is our book for this month of August, and August 30th at 7 p.m., we are going to have a new hostess that night that will be interviewing our author. Her name is Francine Katzen. I'm waving to her right now because she's actually in the studio, but I'm not going to pull her on because I told her I wouldn't tonight. She's just learning the technology of StreamYard, which is really easy, you guys. The hardest part of the whole thing is the flow and wanting the author to answer the question fully, but also to get to the next question that's on your timetable or what have you. But Melissa has been so nice to help me with so many meetings. And so has we've had Shoshana as a co-host, and we've had Donaway Lee as a co-host. So Francine agreed to help us August 30th. And if any of you want to do this, to be the actual person interviewing the author, please let me know, because the more of us that are active in the group, I think the more we're all going to get out of it. Melissa, do you have any other thoughts before we close tonight?
No, it's just a blast to come on and co-host and, build that relationship and build the rapport, and you'll have fun doing it. Don't be afraid to step up, step out, try something new.
Right. And then I want Melissa to email Mr. Walsh about all the poetry that he's involved in. We didn't get to talk enough about that. So I want to let everybody know I'm coming to you from Seattle, Washington. This is my temporary home for the week before my husband joins me and I go on another Holland America cruise on the outer passage to Alaska. And it's just part of my training to understand the difference between the inner passage and the outer passage. And I'm actually physically doing it both. I'm not complaining, but I'm like, oh my goodness, here I'm like 3 weeks in the Pacific Northeast and headed back to our beautiful state of Alaska. I could do a whole talk about that, but I'm going to say thank you to Melissa. Thank you, Francine, down there in the studio. I'm going to end the broadcast, but maybe Francine, stay there a quick second. And thanks, everybody. Enjoy Where I Can't Follow by Ashley Blooms, and join us August 30th at 7 p.m. East Coast time. Bye, everybody. Bye, Melissa.